to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
Welcome everybody to tonight's Board of Education meeting. Thank you for coming. Right now I'd like to entertain a motion for approval of the agenda. She should be. I'll go ahead and do it. Mr. Chairman, I move that we approve the agenda as presented. Can I get a second?
With one additional certified classified personnel actions for consideration, item E3.
I believe there was a second from Janine. So I have a motion from Mark, a second by Janine. Any discussion? Okay. All in favor to approve the agenda as presented, please say aye.
Aye.
No?
Aye.
I believe it's all ayes. Okay, moving on, we got public comments. We believe we have a Missy Bear here to make a public comment. You come up here to the podium if you want. Did I say that right? Is it Beyer?
Oh, yeah. My name's Missy Beyer. I live at 2910 Patty Place. It's come to my attention that although there is no district-wide mask mandate yet, you are still mandating masks in several classrooms in various schools. My grandson will be forced to wear one beginning tomorrow. This is a practice that, in my opinion, and many others as well, needs to stop. This decision should be strictly up to a child's parent or guardian. Administrators and board members are in charge of our children's education, not their health, not their freedom or lack of, not their medical needs. It should be the parents' right to choose whether or not their children wear a mask, period. Nobody in this room has the authority to sever parental rights. We are not the DCF. We're not judges. Only a judge can sever parental rights. Please just remember your role. Kids are at risk for everything. And I just want to know, when does this abuse of power end? They are at extreme risk of childhood obesity. Does that mean that you can set up scales in classrooms, weigh each student daily, and the ones that weigh too heavy cut their lunch portions in half? They're at risk of juvenile diabetes. So are we going to perform finger sticks on each student every day and remove the sugary foods and snacks from their lunch pails and trays if their levels are elevated? They're at risk of drug abuse for sure, but that doesn't give us the right to test every student on a daily basis and sentence those positives to rehab. And the list could go on forever. And God bless these lunch ladies who are, you're forcing them to mask up because maybe 1 to 3 children have tested positive for COVID. They are the salt of the earth. They work tirelessly, slaving over hot stoves and ovens for very little pay. Many of them have survived COVID and have been vaccinated. And I challenge each and every one who thinks it's okay to make them wear a mask, walk a mile in their shoes, please. Go do their jobs. You know, put on a hot, itchy, sweaty face mask and try it for a week. Because I happen to know many who are suffering. And I'm speaking up for the teachers as well. I don't know where to begin describing how difficult this has made their jobs. And these masks are a distraction, and they're hindering the teacher's ability to educate our kids. Those of you who believe they work, please, by all means, put one on. And put one on your children. And I just think they should be optional. I don't think we as humans, we don't have the capacity to stop the spread of this virus. This has been proven over and over in hospitals, nursing homes, and everywhere else. And despite our best efforts, it didn't work in the past, and unfortunately, I don't believe it's going to work today. And therefore, why continue? They should be optional, no matter what the circumstances. And last but not least, those who spoke out asking for a mask mandate at last week's meeting, I'd just like you to know that some of these are the people that I've seen all over town, at bars, restaurants, the movie theater, grocery stores, everywhere. And guess what? They were not wearing a mask. I'm not sure why they felt the need to put one on while addressing you and asking you to force our children and our school personnel to wear something that they themselves are not willing to wear. There's a term for this, and it's called hypocrisy. You know, please don't practice it at home. Another lady stated that she wants a district-wide mandate because her little boy doesn't feel comfortable wearing one if the other kids aren't wearing them. And I have some very good advice for this mother. Instead of pulling the mamby-pamby card, why not use this as a valuable opportunity to teach your son to stand up for what he believes in? You know, this is America. He can do that. And it's her job as a parent to teach him how. You know, not everybody gets a participation trophy. And I just want to thank all of you for listening to my concerns, and your consideration regarding this matter would be greatly appreciated. Thank you.
Any other comments? Stephanie? We have some correspondence.
This was a correspondence that was addressed to the Board of Education. I am not eager to take up the board's time with public comments or to speak publicly at a meeting tonight. I could not be present Thursday night for your public comment session because I was home recovering from COVID-19. At least one of those comments requires a response. One of your speakers suggested that St. Catherine Hospital has not even had any children hospitalized with COVID-19. I do not know where he got his data, but that is simply not true. We have had infants and children in the hospital with COVID-19. We have had local children hospitalized in Wichita with multi-system inflammatory syndrome of children as a complication of their COVID. No, we have not had any pediatric deaths, to my knowledge. With all the comments about rights and masks not working and interfering with normal communication, I agree, I have hearing loss. What I did not hear was, what can we all do to work together, take care of each other, and educate our children this fall? I am profoundly grateful that you and other board members have taken the responsibility to decide what is the best approach for our children to remain together in school, the best place for them. I do not know what that answer will be. A month ago, I would have agreed, let's start the year without masks. I do know that COVID is here. It is not going away at the moment. As I write this, I am aware of at least 13 positives in our school system today alone. From my office, we will send another 10 tests to the lab at the end of the day. No, I don't know what our positivity is. Masks suck, but masks work. I personally believe that the only thing worse than masks in school is no school. I believe this is a decision that can be actively monitored and proactively changed on a regular basis as we move through the school year.
Can you read this from?
It's from Dr. Michael Scholl.
That's the last one. Okay, correspondence. Okay, consent agenda. I'd like to entertain a motion to approve the consent agenda.
So moved. I'll say.
Thank you. Motion by Tim, second by Mark. Any discussion? Discussion. All in favor, please say aye.
Aye.
All opposed?
Aye.
Moving on, board goal update, special education program. Mr. Guy. Good evening, sir.
Good evening. Melanie's gonna pull our PowerPoint up here real quick. While she does that, I just want to introduce our SPED leadership team. I'm the director of SPED. Melanie Garrison's our early childhood coordinator. Tammy Moore's our elementary coordinator, and then Tracy Schellenberger is our secondary special education coordinator. Yep. Yep, we got it. So, we're gonna go through updates. It's gonna look a little different tonight than what it has looked in the last couple of years, just because we're presenting it at different times, so some of our data is not gonna line up exactly, but I'll try to explain that as we kind of go through. Next slide, please. So just, we kind of went through who we all are, and then some of the other folks in our office. Tracy Schellenberger is our office manager. Robin Leckwood is our MIS clerk, and she's the one that's responsible for handling all of our data that has to be reported to the state. And then Gloria serves as our receptionist and assistive technology facilitator. And so we combined Gloria's position this last year. Doherty was our assistive tech person, and she retired. And so we consolidated that position into two. And then Brecklin Shrimplin is our IUP reviewer. So some data for this year. Currently we have 80 teaching positions that we have through special education. 6 of those teachers are on waivers right now, which means they're in the process of getting their credentials for special education through an accredited university. 3 of those teachers, we have 3 teachers that are teaching out of content. What that means is they're teaching special education for us, but they may not have the degree for the special education program that they're in. We have 3 teachers that are in the TAP program that are working on their degree. And this year we have 13 long-term subs in special education. 2 of those are covering for a couple of international teachers that just haven't made it to the country yet. And so hopefully they'll be short-term, but right now we have 13 long-term subs in our programs. Currently we have 202 paraprofessionals that are serving our students' positions. 106 of those 202 are working with our more significant, more severe needs kids. So those are going to be your one-on-one paras. They're going to be students that would work in our functional or self-contained classrooms, the RISE rooms, things like that. And right now, as of today, I checked the numbers, and as of today, we have 35 positions that are unfilled, which is an increase from where we were at this time last week. We've also new folks the last few days. Yes, sir.
I'm sorry, to interrupt, but just a quick question. What do you do with those 35 needs?
A lot of things, Mark. We've really kind of tried to identify where we can double up some services, where we can try. To me, that's probably the biggest concern that I have this year. It's just been a real struggle. We did a really good job. I think Mr. Hogan's office did a great job this summer, really trying to get our information out there. You know, they were going out to Food Truck Fridays, and they had a booth, and we got a lot of applications. We did a lot of interviews. We got a lot of folks hired. But for instance, I know we had 2 pairs that showed up on Monday, the first day of school, and some of those programs are hard, and it's, you know, some of those things are difficult, and I think after one day they decided, yeah, this probably isn't for me, and we lost them. So it's been a challenge, and so we've really tried to think outside the box. I mean, I think Pete's office has done a really good job of trying to recruit and find folks, but it's a concern that I have. So the programs that we provide this year, similar to what we've had in the past, CWC, which is class within a class, which is where our special education staff go into the regular classroom and provide that support for those kiddos in the classroom. We have resource or pull-out services where we pull them out to work on specific skills. We have our behavior classroom at Georgia Matthews, where that's really targeted to work on kiddos whose behaviors are pretty significant, to try to get some of the coping skills and some of those strategies to integrate them back into the classrooms. We have our resource self-contained classrooms at intermediate centers and up, where it's more intense services with a lot smaller classroom. We have our life skills track, where those kiddos are going to have more significant cognitive delays, and we want to work on trying to get them some life skills and get some of those independent skills for them. And then our functional classroom, we call it the RISE rooms. Those are for our kids that are most significant kiddos. Those are the kiddos that are oftentimes nonverbal, very limited vocabulary, and really struggle. We've started really trying to increase our services at the virtual academy, and we'll talk about that more here in a little bit. Our transition room, that's the room where we have our kiddos that, as we get new students into 24/7 and we look at their IEP and maybe their IEP doesn't exactly line up with the services that we offer in Garden City, we kind of put them in the transition room, and that's a short-term stay where they're with us for about 30 days. And our goal is to kind of collect some data and see what their strengths and areas of need are to try to determine the best program for them when they transition out. The TP, or the Therapeutic Education Program, is our classrooms that we have in partnership with Compass. So those kiddos are getting they're getting academic instruction for a part of the day, but they also get 2 hours of therapy, direct therapy from Compass every day for some of our kids that have more mental health needs. The day school is a new program that we opened 2 years ago. This will be the 3rd year that we're starting that, and it's grown a lot since we first saw that. And these are kiddos that really struggle with being in a regular school environment. So oftentimes there may be some discipline issues or some pretty significant behaviors, and so that allows us to target that. And that would be even more restricted than the therapeutic program. And so we've got a few kiddos there. The Blockbuster coffee shop, we kind of put that on hold last year because of COVID. It's coming back. It's going to look a little different, and I'll talk about that here in just a little bit too. But we've got that back. And then the FCDC building is where our kiddos that they get expelled for long-term expulsions. So they go down there, and that's where we're able to provide special education services. Because any student who's on an IEP, even if they get expelled from school, legally we're obligated to provide special education services to meet their free and appropriate public education needs. So, did you have another question, Mark?
TKI, is that the transition room?
No, TKI.
Is that special ed?
Yeah, we just missed TKI. So yeah, TKI would be our transitional kindergarten classroom, and so that's a 2-year kindergarten program. Those are for kiddos that are typically they're your true developmental delays, and so they go to school for a half a day in the general kindergarten classroom their first year, and then the other half of the day they're in the TKI room where they work on their IEP goals, with the hope that the next year they're going to go into the regular kindergarten classroom with minimal supports. So, yeah. So this is kind of some of our other support staff. Currently we have 6 school psychologists employed with our school district. Right now we have 7 speech pathologists employed. We're 2 short from what we had at this point last year. And so we have 2 open positions that we're actively recruiting for. We've had 2 interviews that felt really good about, and we were pretty confident we were going to get both of them, and then at the last minute, for whatever reason, they backed out. So we're still working on that. We have 3 occupational therapists. We have 2 physical therapists that serve the districts, and they're not district employees; they're contracted employees. So we contract with them to provide physical therapy services for our kiddos. And then we have a visual impaired teacher, a teacher of the deaf and hard of hearing, 2 adaptive PE teachers, and then we have an orientation and mobility specialist who we contract with the Kansas School for the Blind. And then we have an audiologist that comes and serves our district for 40 days a year. She's employed with Liberal Public Schools, and we contract to get 40 days a year with her. So in addition, we have 2 paraprofessionals that work with our school psychologists. They're responsible for when we get new kiddos in the district. They collect they collect any of the information they can from the incoming district IEPs. They help schedule all of our initial and transfer and IEP meetings. Right now we have 3 sign language interpreters. Last year we had 5, but we've had some kiddos that have either moved out of the district or graduated, and so the need for our interpreters has not been as high. And so we had 2 actually that resigned at the end of the year, and we just have not filled them and kind of kept those positions on hold right now. But we just found out we got a resignation for one of those positions a couple days ago, so we're going to actively start looking to fill one of those positions as well. And then we have a physical therapy assistant that works under one of our physical therapists to provide some of those services in the building for us as well. And then we have, of course, speech pathologists, professional therapists that help the speech pathologists with their caseloads as well.
Okay, can I ask another quick question?
Sure.
Sorry. But on that list there, I guess you'd call them, I don't know, medical support therapists, or I don't know what classification. Do we contract with them like we
These folks here?
Yes.
So the only folks that we have a contract with are our physical therapists. All of these folks are actually district employees for us. So we've hired them and they're, like our physical therapy assistant is and our occupational therapy assistant, they're contracted employees, because they have credentials that they have to meet. Our speech pathologist paraprofessionals are paras that have a specific skill set that they've been trained to do. And our sign language interpreters, there's a rubric that they get evaluated on, and depending on how they do on that rubric determines kind of what their pay looks like based on the experience and the education that they have and the training that they have for sign language. So this is currently what our numbers are. This was as of last week, and like I said, in the world of special education, this data changes on a daily basis. So this was as of Wednesday of last week. Currently, we have 1,167 students in our school district that are on IEPs. 242 of those are at Garden City High School. We have 150 of those in our middle schools. We have 155 of those in our in our intermediate schools. 440 of those at our elementary schools. Garfield right now is 124 at the Early Childhood Center. We have 5 students that are on homebound for medical reasons. And I would say that number has changed. That was 3 last week. So we have 1 student I know who is going in for surgery, and he's got some pretty significant health needs, and the doctor wanted him to stay home and quarantine before surgery, and probably won't see him back until middle of October, I think, is the earliest we get him. Currently, we have 28 kiddos at our parochial schools, and then we have 2 students that we serve at the Juvenile Detention Center, which that has changed too from last week. Last week we were at 0, and so now we have 2 students down there. So those numbers go up and down constantly. Yes, sir.
I'm sorry, I can keep asking all the questions, but on the 28 parochial school numbers, do all school districts support parochial schools, or is that a mixed bag?
So by law, we have to provide services for parochial schools that are accredited. So yeah, they do.
Everybody does.
Yeah. So this is kind of data, so you can kind of see. Did you have a question?
I'm trying to wrap my head around this. How many students we have in the district?
7,200, about 16% of our kids are on IEPs, which is pretty close to the state average.
Yeah. State average is just shy of
Probably
20%.
around 15.
Uh-huh. And so this will kind of give you an idea, and like I said, this is where the data is going to look a little different because we're not comparing December to December like we typically do. But December of 2020, for the high school, you can see where we were in December of 2020 to where we are now. So for instance, the high school has increased 6 students. The alternative center has increased 2. The middle schools have gone up 25. The intermediate centers have increased 4. Elementary schools have gone up 16. Garfield is down 32. Garfield is kind of a unique building because we start the year and we grow about 100 IEPs before the year ends. So when our students, when we get kiddos from Russell Child Development Center, federal law says that, all the other kids, they have to turn a certain age to be in kindergarten, they have to be 5 before September 1st. For special education, if they're getting Part C services through Russell Child Development Center, we have to initiate services on or before their 3rd birthday, no matter when their birthday is. So we're going to grow. We usually grow about 100 students. The 156 that we reported last year for Garfield was pretty low. I think COVID. We really didn't see a lot of parents show up for our child find screenings that we do monthly. Russell reported that their numbers that they were getting from parents requesting evaluations for them at younger ages they were down as well, and so I think we're going to see Garfield go back to where it typically is at the end of the year. So I would guess that we're at 124 at the beginning of the year. I would presume that we'll be right around the 200 mark, if not just a little over 200. That would be my expectation. Like I said, with our homebound kiddos, I kind of talked about that a little bit. We've gone up 3. Our parochial schools have gone down 5, and then JDC has gone up 2 from what we reported last year. So overall, we're up 16 students on IEPs from where we were in December of 2020. So A couple of things that we wanted to share that are new this year to SPED that we're kind of excited about. We've worked really hard to increase services at the alternative high school and the virtual school. I really feel like there's a lot of kiddos that will do well in a smaller setting, and we've just not had a lot of services to provide those kiddos, and so we've allocated another teacher and para to serve the alternative high school and the virtual school. So I'm really excited about that. My hope is that will increase our graduation rate for those kiddos. Work-based learning at Garden City High School. So one of the things that we learned through an in-service that Tracy and I attended back in, I think, February of last year, they talked a lot about our kiddos getting work skills and getting them marketable for our kiddos, especially our kiddos that have more severe needs that, college is probably, and career tech is probably not going to be a pathway for them. And so we've created some work-based stations at the high school. So for instance, Garden City High School, we've kind of created its own little mini copy center. And so the students in that program are making all the copies and putting all those things together to kind of get them some clerical skills. We're doing a lot of things so that we can kind of get our kids more skills to make them more marketable when they leave Garden City High School. We're still working with the college, and we have that partnership where we're going to do the coffee shop. But instead of our kiddos spending the entire day at Garden City Community College, they're going to be down there for just a few periods in the morning where they can do that and then come back and work and get some other skills besides just working in the coffee shop. So that's I hope that it'll make our kids more marketable and give them more opportunities. And then we've been working on this. This is a project that Melanie's been working on with Andrea Baker at Garfield for quite some time. And one of the things that the state has really told us our numbers are not good is for our least restrictive environment at Garfield. And so we have worked with them and come up with a plan. And this year we've integrated 8 classrooms. And so instead of having classrooms where it's predominantly kiddos on IEPs that are in special education in these classrooms, and these classrooms that are predominantly general education students, we've taken 4 of each of those and integrated them. So that these kids are going to have opportunities to be around typically developing peers and get some of those language models, get some of those behavior models. And so the plan is that's going to be a 3-year plan. So we've got 8 classrooms that we've done that with this year. Next year we'll do another 8 classrooms, and then the following year we'll finish off with the last 6 classrooms is kind of the plan. So I'm really excited about that. I think that will be a great opportunity for our kids, and it will also increase our, like I said, give our kids opportunities and give us a little bit better numbers data-wise from the state perspective. With that, I think that's all we have. I would entertain any questions that you have.
On the work-based learning, are you able to get, because I know there are some kids who are able to get out into like some restaurants and things like that, and I'm sure due to COVID you weren't able to do that. Have you been able to renew some of those work situations as well?
We're working on that. I think some businesses and things are a little bit more open to that than others, but I know that Melissa Hayes has done a really good job of trying to organize that, and she's been working on that. Tracy, is there anything you would add?
I think everyone's a little hesitant to get too much going for fear that we're gonna have to pull it back. So I think everybody's kind of just waiting. We've got lots of great work-based stations up there at the high school right now. I think they did 42,000 copies in 2 days. So, I mean,
Kids are,
they
yeah.
are.
And then they're doing the laundry for the athletic department. Mr. Nichols is helping with that. So there's a lot of different opportunities where we've got kids doing things at the high school. We're trying to do that, but we definitely want to get them out in the community more, Laura. I think it really depends. Like Kim Sleep is our adaptive PE teacher, and she does a lot of community-based things with her kiddos. But a lot of her things she can do outside, and it's pretty easy. So she's moving forward with that right now and doing a lot of her services in the community, where our occupational therapists and a lot of the things that they do, it's in a crowded grocery store, it's in a crowded restaurant, and they're not, I think, really comfortable taking all those kids into those environments. And so some programs are doing more of that, and some programs are just, I think, kind of holding off and waiting to see what second semester looks like, with the hope that we can do more of that for sure second semester.
On the flip side of that, has Mr. Wyden looked at anything like that as well for those special ed students?
That is a great question and usually Ron's here for these meetings. To my knowledge, no. I would say no, but that's something we can definitely visit with him about, because I think that's probably a really good idea.
Okay, thank you.
Ms. Hannigan?
Just to piggyback off of that question, do we collaborate with any other community entities or agencies with some of their programs, or do we do transitions with any of those programs?
Like, are you talking like businesses in the community or other agencies?
Social service agencies that might provide similar services of getting people employed or working
Yeah,
or
so
life skills.
when the kiddos turn 14, every kiddo that's on an IEP, we have to start doing transition. There's a transition portion of their IEP. And so Voc Rehab starts getting invited to those meetings. I can't think of the acronym for the other, Tracy. Pre-EDS is another one. They come and they'll do a lot of those things as well. Tracy and I have actually been in consultation with an organization that's, and hopefully we applied to be a part of a grant where we would work with an agency that would kind of streamline all of those agencies with us, so that we'd have better communication, and so they would kind of help us put all that together. And so we should know something here in the next month or so if we got accepted to that grant to streamline some of that as well.
And then my initial question was, so when we talk about a student having an IEP, what kind of time is the equivalent of that? Is we know that they probably have they require some extra services, they require extra time with teachers. Could you maybe guesstimate or share what that might look like?
Like a kiddo's service time for special education.
Yes.
So that could be anywhere from as simple as maybe we've got a kiddo that needs speech. He's a speech-only kiddo that just has a simple articulation problem, where he'll have speech services for 20 minutes, maybe once or twice a week, and that's all he'll have. All the way up to our kiddos in the functional classroom that would be in a special education classroom for the majority of their day, where it's very, very individualized, and they may get into the regular classroom for 15 minutes to 45 minutes a day. So it really, the term IEP really does get utilized, and it's really, we try to individualize that for the needs of the kiddo.
Okay. I guess what I'm trying to wrap my head around is I'm thinking of, over 1,000 students with IEPs, and I'm thinking about the extra teacher time that goes into, because a lot of those kids do both regular classrooms and perhaps services. So I'm just trying to think about what that might mean in terms of the extra hours that go into students with IEPs.
As far as the time for the teachers to plan?
Yeah, or work with parents, or.
Yeah. I would be the first to say that I think, SPED teachers definitely put in their fair share of hours. I think scheduling is a nightmare, because, they put their schedule together and everything looks great, and then you have another IEP meeting, and either you've just accepted little Johnny and you've got to schedule him into services, or little Johnny needs to have his services changed based on what the IEP team has determined. And so they're constantly changing and tweaking their schedules on a daily basis. So yeah, they do put in extra time for that, for sure. And they get a supplemental contract to help with some of that,
I'm just thinking about all the positions that we have available, and I'm just wanting to put it out there how demanding these positions are.
Right.
It's a lot.
It is, it's
Appreciate
difficult.
that
And I think what we're dealing with in Garden City is certainly not unique to just Garden City. The teacher shortage that you're seeing nationally has been a problem in special ed for as long as I can remember. We've always had trouble recruiting, especially if you look at, so in the state of Kansas, basically you have two licenses in special education. You have what they call the high incidence, and you have a low incidence license. And so your high incidence would be what the majority of our special ed teachers are. They could work in like a resource room or work in CWC settings. Our low incidence licenses are our kiddos that are going to be are more significant kids. They're gonna be in the life skills track, they're gonna be in the functional track, where they're gonna be a lot more intense, a lot smaller student to adult ratio, and they really need to have things very, very individualized schedules, you know, and things like that. So yeah, the planning for that is pretty significant.
Thank you.
Uh-huh. Anything else?
Just, I hate to even bring this up because you guys do such an amazing job, first of all. One of the things that's come up in the past was just how we transition, you know, kids through their career from one school to the next, to the high school. And how does it work to coordinate IEPs to the next level?
So, I think we're getting better at that, but I don't think we're great at that yet, Mark, and I'll be honest with you. One of the things that we do, any kiddo that moves from one building to the next, we have a transition IEP meeting for them. And so, if I'm, for instance, going from Bernadine Sitz to Horace Good, we'll have a transition IEP meeting, and so the teachers that work with that kiddo at Bernadine Sitz are at that meeting, and then we also invite staff from Horace Good so that we can get to know that kiddo, and they kind of get an idea, because that helps them. One of the other things that we require is one of these ladies have to be at that meeting, or me, for any of our transition IEP meetings, to make sure that we have those services in place that need to be there. So we do that. Our kiddos that are really severe and really significant, we try really hard to prepare them for that. You know, autistic kiddos, I mean, if you're familiar with working with students with autism, they don't do well with change typically, and so we try to really prepare that. And so a lot of that is getting the kiddos into school before school starts. They come up, parents will bring them up and introduce them to the principal and the teacher before school starts. We kind of set up a plan for them to meet, go around the school and kind of get used to that environment. We really encourage our parents, you know, as they're leaving Garfield, to go to the elementary level for our kiddos that are going to struggle with those transitions. Take them to that school over the summer and let them play on the playground. Just let them get acclimated to that environment. You know, we try to do those things, but I still think there are areas where we can improve, for sure.
Well, I just know in a perfect world, if we have plenty of staff, then all the staff would get together in that transition with the parents and the
Yeah.
child, but
Yeah.
nobody has that much time.
Right.
So,
Yeah, and the hard part about that is, you know, when they're leaving like one program to go to the next program, you've got to, when you invite those other staff, well, then you're pulling the staff out of their classrooms with the kids that they're serving at that time, and so you've got to find a way to cover that too. And so it does, you know, you solve one problem, but oftentimes create 2 or 3 others when you do that, so,
thanks for the comments.
yeah, absolutely.
Janine?
I don't have any questions. I understand how challenging your jobs are and trying to figure all of this out and make everything run and flow in the best way that's going to work for these kids. And so I just wanted to say thank you and that you guys do a great job.
Thank you, Janine.
I did want to make one comment. I don't have any questions because most of the team asked them. But I did get to see probably about 7 or 8 years ago at the new high school, at the old high school, the life skills classrooms. And it was doing some new lighting and stuff like that. But it was amazing to me to watch some of the kiddos and the teachers, if you will, instructors, help them get through just a simple task of opening their refrigerator door, or folding clothes, doing laundry, maybe even cooking something, making their bed, sitting down, getting up, pushing a chair in. It was kind of very unique and humbling to watch other people having to go through that. So, and that I don't want to say teacher, but that instructor, that day pair or whatever, was doing an amazing job. And I was like, man, this is pretty awesome. And it's something that the rest of the public doesn't get to see, of how tedious and hard that you guys all work and do a fantastic job just to meet those individual IEPs. So.
Well, and a lot of those kiddos that are in our functional classrooms and our life skills classroom, you know, Mr. Nichols is a teacher of one of those classrooms, but those kiddos are never gonna be able to live completely and totally independent. But our goal is to get them to be as independent as we possibly can when they leave Garden City High School. So, you know, now does that mean they're gonna be living at home forever? Probably some of them may, but, you know, not all of them. But if we can get them in a group home and get them some independent living skills and get them, you know, exposed to the community, then that's what we wanna do, for sure.
Yeah, and it's exciting to see the data of the next year or two of how those integrated classrooms.
Yeah, I'm
will
excited
work out
for
for
that.
them. It's pretty promising. So, with that, any other questions, comments? Dr. Carter? Thank you guys for coming.
Thank you.
Appreciate all your hard work.
Thank you.
Curriculum reports, Mr. Tone.
All right, I mean,
It's on the desktop, Drew, so just move the screen over just a little bit, there you go.
Well, thank you for letting us come up and present today. Today I have Coach Nichols with me today. Josh obviously referred to him. He is one of our special ed teachers up at the high school. Does a great job, but not only does he do that, he's also our head bowling coach up at the high school. Today what I'd like to ask you guys is to consider passing unified bowling here at Garden City High School. I understand this will be a first reading and probably have to be readdressed. But we would like to get this out in front of you so you guys have, if you have any questions, concerns, you can talk to us about that. So first off, what are unified sports? This isn't a common language that a lot of people know about. Unified sports are the joining of athletes with disabilities with athletes without disabilities coming together to create a team in order to participate in an activity. In the past, the Special Olympics has taken on most of the role of unified sports. Throughout many associations, state associations throughout the country, you're starting to see unified sports move in to the district level, especially at the high school level, into schools. This past June, Keisha, our state association, passed unified bowling as an option for schools to participate in here in Kansas. What unified teams are made up of? They have athletes, what we will refer to as athletes. Athletes are any individual that is a bona fide undergraduate, which means they're 19 years or younger on September 1st, that is a member of the school and also recognized with an intellectual disability as defined by federal law. And then they have partners, and a partner is a bona fide undergraduate student who is also a member of the school who may not have a disability defined by the fed. Why do we need unified sports? We've talked for a long time about inclusion of all students in our schools. Mr. Nichols put it best to me when I talked to him about this. I said, well, what's the difference between acceptance and inclusion? And he put it best by saying, acceptance is like having everybody come to the dance. Inclusion is actually dancing with the partners. And that's what we would do with unified bowling. It promotes inclusion through the idea of shared training together and a competitive experience together. One of the big things that it will do for our students at Garden City High School, it will sweep away a lot of those preconceptions about some of our ID student athletes. Once they start training together, working together, competing together, they will get a much better understanding of each other. At Garden City High School, we already do a great job of bringing our students together, whether they're our special education students or our general education students. You just heard it from Josh, all the different programs that we have, the mentorships. This is just an extension of what they just spoke about. So what does unified bowling look like? Coach, you want to take this part?
Yeah, in other states, what they have done is set up trio teams of up to 5 players. At least 2 of those players will be our identified athletes, possibly 3, and then they will have their partner athletes. The athlete will bowl the 1st, 4th, 7th, and 10th frames of each game in a Baker system format. Now, if any of you have ever watched collegiate bowling, most of the competition that happens at the collegiate level is in the Baker system format. It's a true team competition. It doesn't focus on any individual achievement by anyone, but it's truly a team competition where if they work well together, they are always very successful. We are allowed to have substitutes, athlete for athlete, partner for partner. Also, the rule book says that once they have come out of the game for that game, they're done for that game. Matches will be a 6-game match. In competitive bowling right now, when we go to competitions of the Baker format, it's usually anywhere from 12 to 20 games. So this is just shrunk down a little bit, but it'll still be a very competitive environment because I know there's a lot of the schools that we compete against now in competitive bowling that have already met with their boards and are going after this. The highest pinfall total will be declared the winner. Schools, what we're going to try to do is compete in as many of tries and quads and tournaments as we can, because we'll be allowed 6 competitions throughout the season, exclusive of regional and state. And then at our local level, we want to try to put together 4 teams. We have a population of athletes that we think this is right in their wheelhouse. They would love this, and we have some kids in our competitive program that I think will do a great job of partnering up. And we're going to be very selective in how we partner this, because we want this to be the best experience. You all heard I'm a coach, but what I am more than anything is a special education teacher. And so I'm passionate about this because I want our kids, our special education kids, in my functional program, to have the best experience possible from a program like this. So at Garden City High School, if Unified Bowling is adopted, the focus will be on partner athletes with student participants who provide the most positive experience for the athlete possible. We'll build on already successful programs that we have here at the high school. I'm sure most of you know what we've done in our bowling program over the last 15 years. I'm proud of that, but I'm just really the ugly cheerleader. The kids are the ones that get the job done. Partner students both encourage and assist the athletes in both the competition and the daily practice settings. I want you to know we have amazing bowling centers in this town. Since the day that we started a club program 17 years ago, they have supported us 100%. When they were talked to about the possibility of this, they were on board immediately because they see what a great thing this could be for our athletes. Coaching staff will be trained in the intricacies of meeting the needs of the athletes and will provide modifications when possible to meet their needs. I want to coach this, and I can tell you that my assistant coach, Coach Howard, who's been my assistant coach now for 13 years, she's all in. She wants to be a part of this. The bonus for you guys we are both certified special education teachers. We have worked in this field. This is what we do. We know how to make these modifications, and we know how to help these students be the best they can be.
Good. Yeah, and Coach Howard was actually just nominated.
Yes, she's one of our Crystal Apple nominations.
Mr. Nichols, aren't you a Crystal Apple winner?
I am, 2014, thank you. Melanie and I were in that class. Thank you.
So the cost associated with Unified Bowling, we'll have an annual budget for expenses, any expenses that may be incurred. That's the same annual budget that the current bowling team has to operate off of. Coaching salary would also be equivalent to the current coaching salaries. Those are both assistant coaches on the highest end combined. That's what that would be. Uniform, we're guessing that we'll have around 16 to 18 participants. We're budgeting for 20 uniforms to make sure we fit sizes and everything fits correctly from one year to the next. And then the last one is transportation. We'll have transportation costs with the different tournaments and duels that we go to, we will take a bus to those events for those things. So the total cost associated with this will be $13,800. It is the high school's recommendation that the board adopt this. We understand this is probably the first reading, but this is our recommendation as a high school administration with the support of the central administration staff. Before we leave, the audio works, correct? Yeah.
I'm just grateful I met Jackson because she's a beautiful girl and being able to realize it is very awesome.
I actually met him through Special Olympics Kansas because we don't go to the same school, but like because he joined this past year and I was on last year, and so like through this past year we kind of got to know each other. First off, he seemed like such a hard worker. Like you could tell from like the moment I met him that like what he wants is what he wants, and like no matter what he'll work towards his goal.
We're actually friends. It's just amazing to just know a lot of good friends and be able to high school is amazing.
The state of Kansas and the Activities Association is really excited that we have been offering high school bowling for our membership for the past 17 years. And next year, as we enter year 18, we couldn't be more thrilled that Unified Bowling is now going to be a part of the offerings that we have for the membership of Kansas. Adding Unified Bowling and including a lot of students that typically have not been allowed or have not chosen to participate is going to be huge. And I see perhaps it spawning other activity programs so that we have more programs like Unified Bowling that will allow students that currently right now that are sitting on the sidelines to be a little bit more involved and to be part of that school activity.
These students with special needs, it also benefits everybody else that is in that circle.
I think bowling is an amazing sport for special needs.
I think it's an awesome opportunity, especially for like simple sports I'm having like basketball and soccer. A lot like there's certain special Olympians who can't participate as much just because of their mobility function. So like the fact that they're giving this opportunity to people who have more just like have not as functional stuff is so cool because like it gives them the opportunity to like participate.
I have a grandson with Down syndrome, and it's right for my grandson or Down syndrome to provide a bowling opportunity as it would be for a star football player to get to play quarterback on Friday. I think success, state champion or anything, is going to be that first meet where, you know, it's going to be normalized in a way that I think is healthy for the kids and the parents. And I can tell you, it's going to be a big day.
Being a part of Special Olympics is probably like honestly like showed me like what I want to do with my life, which is so cool to think that at like 16 already. So like 100% join it. Even if it's like a question or like a doubt in your mind, just like join it because like this community is like feel like other like.
Join us at Special Olympics Unified Bowling.
Join the Unified Generation at generationunified.org.
All right. Any questions on the proposal?
Writing's not that easy, but Grammarly can help. This sentence is grammatically correct, but it's wordy and hard to read. It undermines the.
You saw that Shawnee mentioned is doing that, but what other districts like in our area are doing this?
Yeah, so everyone in our league is going to their, whether it be board or superintendent's council, to ask for this. Hayes actually just added regular bowling, just so they could add unified bowling also. So everybody within our league will have unified bowling. It's expected that everyone will have unified bowling when it starts up.
Okay, and then is the season the same as the regular bowling?
No, the season is before, so the season starts in October and runs up through right, December?
It ends the season ends the Thursday before the Thanksgiving break.
Yeah.
And then competitive bowling, our tryout process always happens starting the Monday after Thanksgiving break, with the actual season starting January 1.
And then my last question is, so the partner athlete or the partner person, are they already on the bowling team? Are they bowlers or can that?
Not necessarily. My assistant coach and I have some kids in mind that have already been in our bowling program for a while, that we would like to see join up with this, but it doesn't necessarily have to be already some of our competitive bowlers. And Keisha was really kind in the way that they set this up, because they are allowing 2 seasons of bowling per year for the athletes. They can participate in unified bowling and then turn right around and bowl in the competitive program just a few weeks later. But it doesn't necessarily have to be one of our competitive bowlers already.
Thank you.
First off, as someone who's been pretty critical of the addition of sports programs to a resource-short school district, I have to say that this seems very much about the spirit of sport. I'm excited. Here's my reservation. Talk to me as a special education educator about running a specialized bowling team if you didn't have a special education background. Now, I appreciate that both you and your assistant coach, of course, I'm thinking 10 years, 15 years down the road. Is this doable if you don't have that kind of background?
I think most definitely, because as we move forward in the history of a program like this, you will have people that are in the program, both as athletes, partners, that will, so in other words, take the torch and run with it. I think any certified staff member could be the coach of this if they have some bowling knowledge and a bowling background. I don't know if you want to put someone that has no knowledge in the sport in that situation, but I think that it can be doable, because I think all of us as educators are charged with seeing improvement and development amongst our students, whether they're special ed students or regular ed students. And so we are in a kind of a unique position here, because myself and my assistant coach are special ed teachers. 10 years is a great number, because that's about the time I think I'm going to hang it up. But I can tell you that my assistant coach is younger, and so I think you're going to be safe for about 25.
Most schools that I've talked to about this, they involve their bowling coach in the program, and what they may do is they may hire the assistant out of the special ed department, not necessarily the high school special ed department, but most of the time, one of the two is going to be some sort of special ed certified person.
So you anticipate 15 to 20 kids?
Absolutely. I work very closely with Kimberly Sleep, who is one of our adaptive physical education teachers. She provides service time in my area daily, and one of the things she does in her program is she takes our kids into the community bowling. And so we've got a population that we already are very much aware will bring their game and be very excited about participating in this. You know, the excitement for me is not getting to see them throw the first ball. It's getting to see them put on that Garden City Buffalo uniform and support and represent their school. Because so many kids in our world don't get that opportunity. And now they're going to be on that same level, that same playing field with everybody else. And that's amazing to me. Wins or losses is inconsequential at this point. Oh yes, I'm competitive. That's why we have 2 state championships in Garden for bowling. But this is more about leveling that playing field, getting our kids involved in something they've never had an opportunity to be a part of before.
I can tell you what excites me. I'm probably right in assuming that you're going to add somewhere between 15 and 20 kids who are not covered by another sport.
Yep. Absolutely.
And this has been my criticism all along. When we add sports, are we targeting the same kids in a different season? Or are we reaching down to a unique set of kids to try to engage them in their education? This clearly fits what I felt all along we should be using sports for, and I applaud you for it. And I applaud you for your excitement, and if I could bowl.
He's got passion.
Yeah,
I do have passion, and just so you know, less than 25% of our competitive bowlers participate in any other sport in Garden City High School. Less than 25%. And we have a full program every year.
Pulling Dr. Garland, do you guys feel like we're okay spending this money?
Yes.
Based off of Tim's comments, I'm gonna throw caution to the wind and move that we approve this.
I would say.
Motion's been made by Lauren, second by Tim. Is there any other discussion?
I assume the
I
cottage
just wanna make sure.
Because it's a first read, and usually I get shot down on things like that. I make a motion for a first read, so.
Good one.
I was just gonna make a joke about Laura. I don't mean to.
I have a question and a little bit of a comment. This is in my wheelhouse, working with kids with special needs is what I do. When you wanna add equine to adaptive PE, let me know.
I'll let Kim know that.
Yeah. And I also look forward to maybe this will be leading some future, sped teachers back to our district, because that's where I worked in high school under a teacher in the same type of room as a high school student, and that's what led me to that direction, so that's just something to keep in mind, is maybe bringing some educators back after that, to find that as a passion. The only question I had is, because I didn't see that in the budget, what is the cost for us to our local bowling alleys, or how are they supported? Because I know that they practice at both bowling alleys, and we also have our events there.
Yeah, I will tell you, since 2006, when we started our club program at Garden City High School, we have never been charged a dime by either bowling center. They supported us 100%. Now, I do have a booster club, and every year we make a monetary contribution to our bowling centers, because as a former bowling alley employee for almost 35 years, I understand what the cost center is for running a place like that. And these people, they donate this, each house, every year to what we do. This is a very relevant number to what they give us every year, and no charge. And I will tell you, we are spoiled in Garden City, Kansas. I talk to the coaches in Wichita and the Kansas City area, and their kids go in and they bowl on poor conditions at practices. They rarely get fresh lanes for matches. I can tell you, when my program shows up for practice, we have fresh oil every day. We bowl on two different centers patterns, and so that gives our kids the opportunity to learn to adjust. And this will be no different. Both houses are in total support of us. Will I make a contribution to them? Absolutely. Because we've raised that money so that we can support them. In the long term, the support for them is walking into their bowling center on any given night and seeing 3 or 4 or 5 of my former high school bowlers bowl in league. That's what this is about for them. It's about creating a clientele later on. They get the investment now, grows something later on for them. So to answer your question, they charge us nothing, and we've never, as a district, ever paid them anything. Our booster club takes care of all that.
And a lot of times our bowling centers go unrecognized. Just the amount of work that they put in to allow us to be able to hold bowling events, to hold bowling practice. Dodge City's in a bad place right now. Right now, Dodge is gonna drag down to Sublette to practice and to bowl, because their bowling alley closed because they didn't have the support that our bowling community here in Garden City has. And our 2 houses go above and beyond, not just for us, but for our community. They do Special Olympics stuff outside of the school. They're phenomenal people, phenomenal members of our community, and we can't thank them enough.
by the way, you're still the prettiest ugly coach I've seen, or cheerleader I've seen.
Oh, thank you.
You're welcome.
Thank you.
So motion's been made and seconded. All in favor, please say aye.
Aye.
All opposed? Motion carries. Hey, I'm sorry.
Thank you, guys.
I'm an aye.
Good luck, Coach.
Thank you.
Thank you, guys.
I will hold them dearly.
Up next, CCAC update. Mr. Sullivan.
Lucas.
Yeah, if you would. Yeah. That'd be awesome. Or I can do it. Alright. Here, go get the first one, go cup. Go get Jennifer a cup in there right there. Those two get cups, right there, those two get cups. Yeah. Those two, they all get cups. Oh, hey, hey. That's awesome. No, hey, not those guys. No. I didn't bring it up. Yeah, yeah.
Thanks, sir.
Thank you. We'll get you guys cups. Yours are back ordered. They're coming. All right.
You guys won't need me.
Come on over here. AJ, you can come sit with me. I got you, bro. All right. So, I'd like to thank the board for having us today. My name's Lucas Sullivan. I am the new principal at Garden City Alternative Education Center. I know it's a mouthful. And so I've got a presentation, and then I think we're going to ask maybe for the name change or the board to vote for a possible name change to the building. So I'll introduce who I have here today. I have AJ. Can you just wave, AJ? AJ is a second grader. He's in our littles at the TEP. All right, and he wanted to come here today. Shay, she's one of our Stuco members at the Alternative High School. Kelton is one of our Stuco members at the Alternative High School. And then Ryan is in the bigs at the TEP. So we've got representation from a lot of different entities. So, first, I just want to say a little bit about what our building is. And what all goes on in our building, and then why we're looking to possibly change the name of the building. So, are you good?
Analysis right up there.
Okay, perfect. All right, so what is all encompassed at JDA Hall? What is all encompassed at the Alternative Center? We have the Alternative High School. Right now, we're approximately 90 students, which I think is probably as high as it's been in a long time. We are pretty well full at the Alternative High School, so that is a portion of our building. Another portion is the Therapeutic School. So with that is a partnership with Compass. These are students that might have some social emotional behavior issues, and they are with us, and we have a littles, so it's mostly a K4 room, and Teddy's been there quite a few times there. And then we also have a middles, and then and a bigs for the Therapeutic School. So our capacity is 30. Right now it's around 15, but we're taking more folks into the Therapeutic School as we speak. The day school. So this wasn't even part that I even knew about going into the when I took the job. Lisa Jewell, who is up for Crystal Apple, and she does an amazing job at the day school. The day school is a classroom kind of within the Therapeutic School, but it doesn't have anything necessarily to do with the Compass. But the day school is the most restrictive environment in our district. So these are all special education students that maybe were not successful in their placement. So those students, I believe we have 7 right now at the day school. All those students have a one-on-one parent. So that is another portion of our school, that we have. The Garden City Automotive Program, which is an awesome program that got started last year. We're still continuing to build that. We really want to build it even larger. We have 12 students that are from the alternative high school that are in the automotive program. We also have 12 students from Garden City High School that come over to the automotive program. We have, I believe, 7 students from Holcomb and 2 students from Lakin that come in the afternoon. And we also have 12 students from the community college. So again, another program within our building that's growing. We'd like to expand it eventually. Right now it's geared probably towards juniors and seniors. There's a arts program with Ford that we would like to maybe integrate next year, and that would get more freshmen and sophomore. Right now, students that are in the automotive program receive 12 dual credits. So they're able to get 12 credits towards graduation and then already come out of either the alternative high school or Garden City High School with 12 credits from the community college. So another program that's not necessarily at J.D. Adams Hall, but I oversee as a principal, is the Juvenile Detention Center and the FCDC site for expelled students. So Juvenile Detention Center, we supply 2 classrooms through the Southwest Juvenile Detention Center and 3 employees through the district, and we oversee that. And something that was really cool that I don't know has happened, my understanding is it's been a long time, or it hasn't ever happened. We had 2 graduates from the Juvenile Detention Center here. I think it was the very first day of school, actually, our very first day back. So we did have 2 graduates. It was really cool to have a ceremony and be able to give those kids diplomas, and Heath and Glenda were both in attendance for that, and I really appreciate them being there. The FCDC site, these are students that are expelled for whatever reason, and this gives them a classroom off district grounds, but they have a classroom where they can go somewhere, get a meal, and work on their classes through ingenuity. So other things that are in that building, the copy center is not on here, but the copy center is in our building. The Kansas Gear Up with Amanda Kennedy, the regional office is in our building. We have the transition room. So the transition room are students that move into the district. We may not have all their paperwork, they may have an IEP. So we get the right placement where they go because certain schools offer certain programs. For instance, Horace Good has different special ed programs compared to Cage. So in order to get these students in the right environment, they are put in the transition room with Tina Arliano, and that gives us an opportunity to make sure they're in the right place. So that is housed in our building. Adaptive PE, like Kim Sleep, for instance, is in our building. Our occupational therapists, our physical therapists are also in our building. So, and then also, Gina also is the person that services our special education for the Catholic schools, so St. Mary's and St. Dominic. So we do have 3 therapists in our building that do go out to the parochial schools and service special education for them. So we're looking at the name change. So why from Garden City Alternative, Garden City Alternative Education to what the name we'd like to change it is Garden City Achieve or GC Achieve and get the alternative. So why get rid of alternative? As I took this position and people asked all around town, you know, where are you at? What are you doing? I was like, well, I'm taking over the alternative center. Well, that's where all the bad kids go. No, that's not the case. And so to get out of that mindset, that change the culture is to just get out of alternative and talk about non-traditional. This is a non-traditional setting and get the culture changed into a positive way. Also, to have alternative not on diplomas. You know, there's some studies and research, and it's probably something a little bit older, but you know, if in front of like a military board or in front of a college, and there's 2 students, one that graduated from a school that says alternative and a school that's not an alternative, you know, the student that was not from an alternative a lot of times would be, they would take that student. So we'd like, part of this would be that when you do graduate, that it would be off the diploma. I think it boosts the student and staff morale in our building. And one thing, our building is kind of like a jigsaw puzzle all thrown out onto the floor. And with all the different pieces, I mean, like adaptive PE and the Therapeutic School and the Virtual Academy, how do we bring all those pieces together? So I think a new logo and a name change to where we can bring all the pieces together and have those pieces interact. You know, how can we have adaptive PE help? How can we have the alternative high school kids, like the last 2 Fridays, our walking classes have come and hung out with our littles during their recess. So how do we integrate all the different groups in there, and how do we put all the pieces of the puzzle together? So bring the building together. And then the one thing over and over again, well, that's where the bad kids go. No, it's not. These are awesome kids. Some have chosen to be there, or because we offer 21 credits, so you can get done early. Like Shay, for instance, she wants to get done early and get on with career in college. And so it's not necessarily bad kids. We have kids that, you know, weren't successful in another setting. Garden City High School is, you know, one of the best 6A, I think the best 6A school in the state. But, you know, not every kid is successful in a building of 2,000 kids. And so, you know, and I can relate to that. I went to a school with 100 kids in the high school, similar size to what we have at hopefully soon to be Achieve High School. And so I understand having that smaller class size and that smaller, make it more of a family atmosphere. And I feel like that our kids aren't always, you know, they may not have the best environment, you know, and I do appreciate, we do have some parents here that are supporting, you know, AJ and supporting Ryan, but not all of our kids have 2 parents in the household to support them. A lot of our kids, as I talk to them, they have no parents that are even in the picture. They're in foster care. They are, you know, living with friends. They're maybe aunt or uncle. So it's not so much that, you know, they have made poor decisions. It's maybe that their environment has pushed them to a certain direction, and we're helping them just achieve the degree, and not only get a degree at the end of the day, but have skills ready for after high school. And so that's kind of the whole idea with Achieve. Changes that we made to the building. We have, one thing that was huge, first thing I talked to people was, we need to get the Therapeutic School and the Alternative School on the same schedule. Staff meetings, PLCs, the utilization of staffs. Like today, we were able to get paras down from up in the high school to work in the day school because we had some paras that weren't there. So to have that continuity and bring everybody together, that has been huge. Also, the alternative high school starting at 8:20 instead of 7:50, it's helped with truancy. I think it will continue to help with truancy. Other changes, I didn't know this was such a big deal until I said it at this first faculty meeting and everybody started clapping. So having a vending machine, there's no vending machines in our building. And so what Pepsi is bringing in, we'll have one for students and one for staff. And our day school kids are actually going to stock, they're going to be able to stock both of these machines. So they'll get the product, and then Miss Jewel and the kids in the day school are going to stock. So again, bringing everybody together. The logo and branding, you can see kind of the new logo. I kind of think, you know, I'm a big K-State fan, so when Bill Snyder took over at K-State, the new branding, the new culture, we're going to be positive moving forward, and that's kind of the idea with the new Phoenix, something strong, powerful, but something that, and it doesn't matter the age, that's the one thing, every kid's like, oh, that's so cool, when do we get shirts and all that, so, and we're going to provide all the kids shirts, right? You like it? You're a fan, aren't you? Another thing, we got accepted, I think there was maybe 50, 55 schools that applied to be part of Project ECHO. It's an anti-vaping program with the state of Kansas, and we were one of 20 buildings that got selected for that, and we're the only non-traditional building in the state of Kansas that will be a part of it. So we're just starting to get into the process of it, but I think it's going to be great for our student body. You know, I'm not naive to know that that's an issue, not just in our building, but throughout the state. But it's going to be something else in our building that we can be proud of. And then community partnerships, like the Empirical Foods. This summer we were part of the Empirical Foods, the Feed America program that we started a pantry. You know, I know Mrs. Borders is, I appreciate her donating hygiene products to Ms. Yonkman and to our pantry, the GC Arts. So we had to get creative because there's obviously a shortage of teachers, and so we didn't have an art teacher necessarily. So how are we going to get creative to get an art teacher to our students? And we were able to grab, for our high school kids, a art teacher from Kenneth Henderson to do an overload. And then GC Arts is gonna create, what she calls art boxes, so projects that they're gonna bring in that's geared towards our different age levels and our different abilities at the day school and the therapeutic school. And so we're partnering with GC Arts for that. So again, looking for those community partnerships within our community. And then obviously, I talked a little bit about our automotive program, so growth in our automotive program. And then this is one thing that hopefully we're getting the ball rolling. I asked, we're the only elementary school that doesn't have a playground, and our kids probably need a playground more than any other students in the district. So, and the Lieutenant Henderson, they'll have 2 fine arts credits. So just trying to figure out new elective opportunities for our kids at the high school. So name change process, I started probably in the interview process and all that we were gonna look at maybe changing the name. So started with the district leadership team. I really worked a lot with our lead teachers and building leadership team, bouncing ideas back and forth with them. And then as school got started, I met with all the different classes about changing the name of the building. So, and then during our back to school faculty in service as well, just getting input. Some people are like, well, we need to have J.D. Adams Hall. Well, yeah, because the building name, the actual building name, all stays with that building. But can we do something to change the entire entity to make it all together, to fit all those puzzle pieces together? So we met with all students in person. I had a number of students that wanted to come and be here tonight to support the name change, the logo change, and then we're at 4 minutes, so I guess that's where we're at. So kind of the idea is what are we looking at? So Garden City Achieve, GC Achieve for short at J.D. Adams Hall. So the GC Achieve High School, GC Achieve TP, the Achieve Day School, Achieve Virtual Academy, and now the Virtual Academy is a separate entity because the state is requiring that now, but it will be housed in that building. And Mrs. Mormon, who's the principal there at Virtual Academy, is on board with it being Achieve Virtual Academy, and then the partnership Achieve and Garden City Achieve GCC Automotive. When I showed the new logo to Mr. Pfeiffer, the dean up at the college, and the college professors, they were stoked about getting this on some of their shirts and stuff as well. So I guess we're asking to change the name of the building from Garden City Alternative Education Center to Garden City Achieve. Obviously, J.D. Adams Hall will stay the same. Kind of our thing is with the Phoenix, we're still going to be the Phoenix. It'll still be red and black. Our idea is to rise up against other things that might be environmental things, rise up and get a degree, but achieve not just a degree, but go above and beyond. So I know I'm going to put some of these kids on the spot, but they said they wanted to say a few things about the mascot and the name change. So AJ, what do you think?
That it's really cool and that it's really good for the school.
Jay, what do you think?
I really like the whole new mascot and the name, well, the word achieve into the name, because like he said, like, people think it's like the bad kid's school, and it's not. Like, he's really kind. I'm a really nice person. I'm really respectful too. I'm not a mean person or a bad kid. And well, yeah, I really like his idea. I've always been supportive to him about the name change.
And Shay's an office aide in the second hour, and I was answering phones one day, and I needed somebody to be bilingual, and she was able to get on the phone and talk and get me through the conversation. So she's awesome in the front office helping out. Kelton, freshman at our building, what do you think?
I think it's a good idea. It makes it shorter, and it makes it more, that it gives it more of a positive connotation to it.
Mr. Lanigan?
Well, I think it's really well. I think it's a good name for it. It represents our school, and it'll respect our motto, and a way of saying that we are a school that will help other kids that are in need of help.
So I guess we're asking the board, and I don't know if they're taking action tonight or if they can take action, to change the name from Garden City Alternative Education Center to Garden City Achieve.
And this is one I think we shared with you that if you, we would be okay if you want to follow your two-step process. You don't have to make a decision on it tonight. Minor clarification, we kind of looked at it as the building name, what was named originally as JDX Hall, but the school name, and that has to be sent into KSB. This would then be the school name, GCHE at JDX Hall. So, questions? I'm going to get you going first. Janine, do you have any questions, comments?
We'll get you a
I'm
cup.
excited about.
We'll get you a cup, Brad Keith.
That'll work. Can I ask you about that? Now, I'm excited about all of the cool things you've got going on. There's a lot of the positivity that's surrounding everything is great, and it's nice to see. Kids just learn differently in different environments, and some learn better in bigger environments, some learn better in smaller environments. So I feel like we're very blessed to have the alternate school, or possibly Garden City Achieve, JDA as well. I think that it's a great opportunity for all of our students. So thank you for what you're doing.
I'm good.
I only have positive things to say, and I'm really proud of all of your students that you brought tonight. You guys have been amazing. Thank you for time coming to speak.
Thank you for bringing in the therapy dog. The littles love it every time. They enjoy it.
I could ask you after hours or after the meeting, but why does the state require a separation for the online school?
Primarily because we fund them, they're funded differently according to the state, and so they want to separate those kids.
They want to be able to track the data.
Yeah, and up until this year, we've had the option to have them as a program underneath another school, but this year they told us it's no longer an option for that. Virtual schools have to have their own building numbers and stand on their own.
But there's a lot of integration, like we have, so the high school teacher there, Mrs. Douglas, she also does our PE at and then we also have students that are in the morning virtual, then they come to the alternative in the afternoon. So, I mean, they're different entities, but we still work together under the same name.
Thank you.
I just really love your enthusiasm, and I thought Mr. Baldus did a great job of starting to turn things around in JDA, and I'm just really happy to see that his legacy, like you're picking up and going, but full speed ahead, and I just really appreciate that. It breaks my heart to think that anybody would think there's a school for bad kids, because there aren't no bad kids. So I think this is a great idea if we can, change that perspective in any way. So that's all. Thank you. I'm really excited about it. I've always been a big supporter of the alternative school ever since Mr. Ron started it. I even wore my red today because I knew you guys were coming. So, I'm really excited about your enthusiasm too. I was really excited when you got the food pantry with Feed America, and being able to be there that day to see you guys get all that stuff was really awesome. I'm hesitant to do anything today, and would really like for us to do our two-step process, because I remember when I first came on the board and, going door to door and hearing people say, I'm so against 2 high schools. And this really pushes us more to 2 high schools in this community. Even though we don't have 2 football teams, we don't have that separation, I really want to be able to hear feedback from the community with regard to this. I know you've done a really great process in-house, but now being able to have it out there for the community to hear, I really feel like we need to have their input as well. So I'd really like to not take action tonight on it. Although I'm supportive, I think it's a great idea, and I love the new papers.
Yeah, I couldn't agree comments thus far. I've been to 2 of the graduations over there and got to hand out diplomas at both graduations, and some of the kids I've got to see grow up with some of my kids. And one of them actually graduated sooner versus my son, and I was like, hey, what are you doing? You know, what's going on? And it was very exciting to see him wanting to start his career sooner, just like the miss back there. So I applaud you on that and keeping up with Mr. Fellows' dream and continuing on with that. But I do, however, agree to probably table this for now. Let's get some feedback from the community, but I'm on board. And thank you very much for the mud.
And one thing that I did hear from community members is JDA, it has I mean, if somebody went to Garden City High School, obviously JDA was a big part of maybe their schooling. So that the ones I've talked to were very, especially the Garden City High School graduates, JDA needed to be a part of that, and that, I mean, and it will be, so.
And the only thing I'd ask is, if you wanted to donate to the pantry, how could you do that?
You can get a hold of me or Mrs. Yonkman, our counselor, and we would be more than willing to take food or hygiene products.
Backpack stuff like that.
Backpacks, things, yeah, supplies.
Fantastic. Okay, thank you very much.
Thank you guys, I appreciate it.
Thank you. You guys are very much.
Yes, I don't want to skip.
They're not that.
Good job. We're gonna send us Sabrina pictures, that's okay.
No, you're fine, they need to get through, so it's all good.
Thank you again, guys.
Great job, guys.
Next up, unfinished business, discussion of the 2021-22 district budget. Consider approval for publication.
Hello, tonight I'm seeking the approval of the publication of the notice of exceeding the revenue neutral rate and the publication of the 2021-2022 budget. Per state requirements, these notices will need to be published on our website as well as in our newspaper for a minimum of 10 days. I have on the screen the budget presentation just as a quick refresher, and I'm happy to answer any questions that you may have. So last meeting, we went through these set of topics, talked about the mill levy and the timeline, which is now updated. So here you can see the increase of our general fund budget. And then the local option had an increase of 0.3 million. Our local option base general fund will be 31%. A reminder on some of our budget priorities, so investments to attract and retain the best possible staff to work with their children, evidence and research-based programs to improve student outcomes, and maintaining reasonable local property taxes. Here is the enrollment summary changes. As you can see, the decline in enrollment over the last several years. Our assessed valuation, so a table to show over the last 10 years, 11 years. And then our summary of mill levy and how it has remained steady for the last several years, and then what this year's increase would look like. How the mill levy calculations, so some of the positive impact factors, as well as the negative impact factors. And then this has been modified since the presentations, don't go by these. And then, I would love to answer any questions if you guys have any.
Jim? Laura?
I'm good.
Janine, any questions, comments?
Okay. No, I'm good.
We need a motion.
Yes.
Publish.
Yeah. I would like to move, Mr. President, that we approve publication of the notice exceeding the revenue neutral tax rate for 21-22 school year, and publication of the 21-22 budget.
Can I get a second?
Second.
Motion made by Mark, second by Laura. Any further discussion? Okay. All in favor, say aye. Aye.
Aye.
All opposed? Motion carries. Thank you.
Can I just make a comment real quick?
I'm sorry?
Can I make a comment real quick?
Yes, please do.
And thank you so much for your hard work this first year and go around. And congratulations on surviving. And how much caffeine and chocolate did you need?
Every day, lots of caffeine for sure. And thank you, it's a pleasure to be here, and it's been an awesome learning experience. Sorry, just a mouse back up there too.
Thank you, Colleen.
Thank you.
Okay, COVID update?
All right, I'm gonna take you through our website and some of the changes that we've made. So, I'm gonna go there and grab my notes here. Okay, polling was done in 3 minutes. This is gonna happen, so. Polling the district data. So this is on the district website under starting schools. So we now have the data available for the county as well as our district data. So the positivity rate currently for Finney County has gone from 15% to 29%. And this is the data by week that you're seeing here. New positive cases, it went from 64 to 86. Now, we have our school data. So new positive students, the top line, the orange is going to be our year-to-date, our running total, if you will. And the blue are our new positives by the week. However, I will point out that this is saying that we started out with 7 the first week, and then we went up and we're now at, and then this last week was over 15. Just today, we had 13 cases. So the next little dot's gonna be just a tad bit higher, I'm going to estimate here, because we've already topped last week. Average daily absences by the week. So these are student attendance information. The orange line again is all student absences, and then the blue line is students' absences as it relates to COVID. So they're quarantined or they're positive, but it is a COVID-related absence. And again, can we go back just a second, please? Okay, so last week we topped out at 113. Today, student quarantine just today, 185. So just to kind of put it in perspective, where we're heading.
Those quarantines are 5 days, 7 days?
It depends. So it's up to the health department on quarantine. But it can be 10 days, it can be 14 days. It depends on, sometimes they're allowed to test early, and come back early.
And just to be clear, that 185 isn't new students quarantine today, that's how many students were not in school today due to a COVID quarantine.
That's why I asked how long, because,
Yeah, some students go off that list and some other students will come on that list every day. Typical is 10 to 14 range is what we're kind of seeing. All right, average number of students sent home per day with symptoms. Last week, it was low. There were some days we didn't have any, and then a couple days we had one. Last week, it went up to 7. Today, we sent 16 students home with symptoms. Our weekly attendance rate, as the COVID numbers go up, of course, our attendance goes down as kids are staying home. So you're seeing the attendance, the first week of school was 90, which is already starting low, because usually that first week of school, we're all back and we're all excited, and that number's 95 to 98 range typically, and we started out lower than normal and are going down.
can I ask another quick question? What, students have a certain number of days they can be gone without excused, and so obviously these are all excused because they're all identified.
Correct.
I
So,
assume they're identified. Well, if they have symptoms, it's not identified because there's no test. So it's a mixed bag.
so if they're positive, then we know that, but if it's a quarantine, it could be sister's positive, mother, father, uncle that lives with us, or grandpa that lives with us is positive, so it's a household contact. And so we usually know, but the school knows what the reason is for them being quarantined, but if it's a household contact, then they have to stay home. That's a separate code in our system, so it doesn't count against those days that parents can excuse. Staff, Heath, do you want to speak to this one? Or do you want me to just jump in there?
You can go ahead and address some of that.
Okay, yeah, alrighty. So the top blue line is staff absences for any reason. Then the line under that, looks like gray to me, is classroom staff attendance, or absences, rather. The two bottom lines are COVID-related absences. So the top line is staff absences, all staff. So this is plant facilities, nutrition, technology, ESC, classroom, that's all of them. And then the bottom line, the yellow, is just classroom staff. So these are teachers and paras primarily.
So this is individuals.
Yes.
I do have a question on that.
Yes, ma'am.
So when a staff has to stay home, maybe because a student or one of their children have COVID, or is that considered COVID related or not?
Yes. If it's a household contact quarantine, yes.
Okay, thank you.
Mhm.
And just to clarify, if they have a household or classroom contact situation, if they are vaccinated, they are not required to quarantine.
If they're asymptomatic, and that's on our flow chart, so we're gonna.
If they're contact vaccinated and asymptomatic, they're not required to come.
Correct. Yeah. So, and we're gonna, you brought that, that's perfect. We're gonna go into the flow chart just a little bit also. Yes, you're correct. New positive staff per week. So the blue is the positive staff by week, and then the orange is the total, the cumulative running of that. Today, we had 4 staff, so that blue line's going to pick up again for this next week.
Can you count those positives, do you know whether they're symptomatic or not?
Most of the time, the nurses have talked to them, or someone in the department has talked to them, so we do know. And usually it's a symptom that has caused them to go be tested. We've had a couple situations where maybe their spouse was positive, so they wanted to test, but most of the time they're showing symptoms. This is our substitute data. So they're not quite parallel, but a little bit. So the top line are the number of subs that have been requested by the week, and the bottom line is our fill rate. So he's going to talk a little bit about that just a little bit later. Average number of students quarantined. So you can see that that number has gone up, and again, the students quarantined today was 185, so those numbers aren't even on the chart yet, but we're gonna bring those numbers down, and it will go up again, next week.
Are these just students that are quarantined because of contact outside of school?
Right now, we've been able to say that all of them are outside. We're watching a couple situations just to make sure, but most all of them, well, I will say all of them at this point have had an outside exposure.
I'm sorry, do you have a typo on that graph? Sorry.
Linda, do we also have these broken down 185 by school? Are we seeing like a trend? Is it the older kids, the middle, or the younger?
Right now, it's pretty well divided. So we've got, at the end of the day today, Heath, can you go back to Garden City Schools? And go to home? Oh, yeah.
Go to home?
Uh-huh. Will let you? And the click here, around this side? On the right-hand side, there we go.
No.
Nope, wrong one. Yeah, right there. So we are keeping track on our chart here, so you can go to this on the website. You might go through a couple of them. I believe when I counted this afternoon, we had 17 of our schools that were yellow. So it's all over the place, Dana, as far as numbers. There are just under a half, 17 schools are yellow. So, where to go? I guess we can just go down. KH is a good one. There's lots of diversity colors on there. There's a few yellows you can see there. So we have 2, 3 elementaries, I think, that are green yet. And the alternate center is green. So
Then we don't have 17.
we don't have 17.
We have 18 total.
Yeah, so we're down to 14 and 8. So you can find those in the teachers' classrooms that are yellow on that one.
Can I ask another question on that? I should know this already, but the yellow status is put in place because a student has tested positive in the classroom or they've had contact.
A student, there is a positive in that classroom. So if,
Or student or staff, I guess.
right, student or staff is positive and has been in that classroom. So if they are already quarantined and then they become positive and they never show up at school, we don't turn it yellow. So it's only if that person was experiencing symptoms and was in the classroom that it becomes yellow. And then it was later confirmed as positive. All right, I do want to walk through the protocol list before I turn it over to the deputy superintendent over there. So there have been some questions about how our classrooms placed into modified quarantine. So you all have a copy of this on your table. So I just want to point out that this is Health Department protocol for quarantining of students. Pardon?
Put this on the screen.
Yep. So you'll have to go out, it's on the desktop. You have to go away from the PowerPoint. No, you're absolutely fine, it's on there, we're ready. This will make it easier for me to comment it as well, so.
That's fine.
Yeah, so as you see, it does say local health department determines the protocols. So they determine who the close contacts are and those students or staff are then placed into modified quarantine. The modified quarantine, we use that term because we're not making them stay home the 14 days as long as they follow part of this protocol. So we'll walk through that. So notice that if a person has a mask on, then there is no close contact. So we have had situations where a student or a staff member has had a mask on and they later became positive, then there are no close contacts. So again, no yellow classroom perhaps, or no people that have to be quarantined, if you will. But if they're without a mask, then if they're asymptomatic, so let's take an elementary classroom, for example. So we have an elementary classroom that a student or a staff member has been positive and they were not wearing a mask, and the children or the staff, other staff in there were not wearing masks. So we're gonna go down, if they're symptomatic, of course, then they have to stay home and be tested. If they're asymptomatic, the next question is, are you vaccinated? So if they're vaccinated, then it goes to a yes, they can go back to class as long as they remain asymptomatic. If it's no, then have they been tested positive for COVID in the last 6 months? If it's a yes, they return to class as long as they remain asymptomatic. If it's no, that comes over here to one of these three. So the first one is they may stay in school as long as they wear a mask for 14 days from the last exposure, and our nurses will monitor these kids daily. So this is the option that the health department came up with to allow students to stay in-person learning.
As long as they stay asymptomatic.
As long as they stay asymptomatic and wear a mask. If they don't want to wear the mask, then their option is to stay home in quarantine. So it is a choice here at that point, but the health department really was working hard to try to keep kids face-to-face as much as possible. So we've heard stories in the news about the health department literally walking into schools and shutting entire classrooms down because there's been a positive, or shutting entire school. I have a friend that her entire school got shut down because of a positive. The health department said everybody's quarantining. So when it's an elementary classroom, just consider that those kids are with the same group of kids all day long. So every child in that classroom is considered a close contact. In our secondary buildings, because they switch more frequently, we really do the close contact tracing, and the health department wants a list of who is sitting immediately around those kids, because they aren't together all day long. And then they work from that list out. So we still turn the classroom yellow, but the close contacts are identified just a little bit differently because they're not together for the same amount of time. Hopefully that makes sense. And option 3 is pending staff and supply availability may opt to test daily for 7 days from last exposure and remain in school. Self-monitor for 14 days, no mask required, but it does require a daily test. And right now, we are awaiting supplies, but once we know we have supplies, then Michelle said her staff would be ready to do that as well. So there are 3 options if you fall down this yes line, yes or no.
And I just want to clarify a couple things on there. The quarantine is a function of the health department, not of the school district. That's a public health department. And so our health department could choose to implement a 14-day quarantine for every student in that classroom. They have given us the option to offer a choice to do a mask instead of quarantining at home for 14 days, or if testing is available, to test kids daily. And as long as they stay asymptomatic, either wearing a mask, and their tests come back negative and they're asymptomatic, then they would be able to stay in class for face-to-face learning. But they don't have to, they wouldn't have had to have offered that option. So it is a choice. And I think sometimes that gets lost. And it's, our speaker tonight, I think this is kind of where she was headed, that some students are being mandated in certain classrooms. Well, the two places that could happen is as a result of this, or as a result of a staff member with a medical condition, a certified medical condition, receiving an accommodation to have others in the class wear masks. And I think that's happened 3 times in the district with over 500 teachers. Can you explain the accommodations again? Yeah, so if a staff member has a medical certification that they're at risk, at an exceptional risk, and their physician certifies that medical condition, we have had staff members request an accommodation that the people in their workspace, their classroom, their office, wear masks while they're there in order to provide protection to that staff member. And so we have handled those on a case-by-case basis as an accommodation, and those have only been granted when it's certified
relevant because it's only been 3, but if that opportunity, if that case arises, our parents, if they request, have the option to move their student out of that class.
Absolutely. If the parent doesn't want their kid in there, then we would provide, if there's space in another class, we would provide that opportunity for them.
In another class, in another school?
Most of the time, parents don't want to move their kids to a different school. I don't think we've encountered that, but that could be a possibility if the parents willing to transport them.
That's what I was gonna say, transportation would be kind of do we have supplies to test daily for 7 days?
So we received a grant. Michelle applied for a grant and received a grant through KDHE to provide those supplies. Part of the grant was also to hire an additional nurse because of the extra overhead with doing all the testing. So we're still in the process of trying to get all that lined up, but we anticipate if we can find the people, we don't have it today, but we do anticipate having the resources to be able to offer more testing for students or staff in the future.
And then another quick question, since this is health department, and they're sort of accommodating us by helping us keep kids where they need to be, and staff for that matter, I'm wondering, we had all this discussion last year, where we did our darndest, given that there was no vaccine, to keep kids safe and continue the goal of quality education. And of course, it was a challenge, but we also found ourselves asking the community to hang in there with us. And I know we represent the community, but we don't have any authority other than a partnership as community members to work with our community. So is this also an accommodation to the community? Because obviously if kids or staff have been exposed, whether they're here or there, there's still that need to consider the requirements of the health department.
And I should clarify, this is for school exposures. If a student is exposed due to a household contact, then they don't get the option to come to school wearing a mask. So the quarantine numbers that Glenda shared with you that we had today, 185, most of those kids have, and I think that's kind of the question you asked, if I understood it right, Jennifer. Most of those 185 kids, if not all of them, are quarantined because they're a household exposure. So they are missing school, those 185 kids right now. Whereas if it was exposed because you were in a class with another student, if you choose the option of wearing a mask right now, you don't have to miss school. But it's a choice. The other option right now would be to quarantine, and ultimately when we can do testing, then that would be an additional option to do a daily test.
You know, one of the purposes of the question is if it's good enough for here, why isn't it good enough for there? And I don't want to second guess anybody, but certainly we still have the goal of kids in a classroom with their teacher.
Right. The rationale, Mark, as it's been explained to me, is the amount of time that kids spend in the house and the likelihood of transmission, where it's been a household contact, then they're less likely to do the modified quarantine because you're eating, you're sleeping, you're spending so much time in that household, whereas, school is a smaller subset of that time. That's my understanding of it, but.
How are parents being communicated with regard to this? Because I had a couple of questions come up, and I apologize, I didn't get you emailed on this issue sooner, but is the health department sending something? How are parents knowing that their classroom's on yellow, their kids' classroom's on yellow? Especially with a high school when you've got 7 or 8 classes. I know I'm not checking my boys' classrooms. How are parents being notified?
So, Michelle and the nurses are working closely with the health department to figure out who those close students were in each class. So sometimes it takes a full day to turn that around. And I think the health department doesn't do quarantining in one day either. So it's usually a day to turn those numbers around, and then it goes out via Remind. So right now we have 2 Remind messages that can be sent out for the high school. One says there's been an exposure in your child's classroom. Then there's a second one that goes out that says your child has been deemed a close contact and will need to wear a mask and, or, one of these other options. So, but it is done as part of the Remind system at the end of the day. I will tell you with our list today that we had, because at the secondary level, like I said, it is different. So we had some positives at KH and at Horace Good. So you figure out the difference of 2 different letters going out for each of those sites, and then all of the letters that went out elementary today. It took our technology people 2 hours today to come up with the email messages to go out to Remind.
So just because, I'm sorry, just to follow up, so just because your student is in that class doesn't mean that they were a close contact and necessarily need to worry. They need that second message or letter saying they were a close contact that they need to start worrying. Just to make sure it's absolutely clear for parents.
I'm not going to say when people worry,
Well,
Laura,
I mean,
but yes. So if you get the letter that says there's been a positive in your child's classroom, so it could literally be a classroom like this, and you could be positive, and I'm going to get that message, but I wasn't anywhere near you. So okay, Mom, yeah, I'm in the same classroom, but I'm not anywhere near. But Dana is going to get the email message that says you've been deemed a close contact because you were together for so much time and you didn't have a mask on, and so now you have to mask up if you want to come to school, because there's a higher probability that you may get COVID.
And remember, there's a difference between the elementary classrooms and the middle school and high schools because of the amount of time that students are together.
Kind of like the household contacts, yeah. So our elementaries only get 1 letter, and that says that you are a close contact.
So you could be in a classroom and not all the kids are required to wear a mask, just because somebody in the class was positive or in close contact.
Correct. So yes, it's positive with this flow chart for you to be able to go back and not have a mask on. But if you were a close contact, so if you were a close contact, those 5 or 6 kids have to wear a mask, but nobody else does.
Well, then you still have the option 3.
Yes, yes. Once we get that available, absolutely.
So,
I do have one more question. So this was constructed by the health department?
The health department and Michelle.
Okay, because I do have some question about, if you are vaccinated, you can return with no restrictions, but, I mean, they're saying even if you're vaccinated, you can still get COVID and you can still transmit COVID. So I'm a little, curious why, even if you're vaccinated, you don't have to, if you were in close contact. And I'm a little concerned about that.
So this was created by the health department with Michelle in late July. The guidance is probably changing, so it may need to be updated at some point, but until the health department gives us a different direction for that, this is what we're going with. So,
I think that the media attention on breakthrough infections, there's this assumption that breakthrough infections are a high proportion of total infections, which is so far from the truth. We don't have a handle yet on what percentage of people are vaccinated. But breakthrough infections at this point look to be at less than 1% of those vaccinated, probably significantly less than 1%. So it is true that if you're vaccinated, you do pose a risk to others. But I just think you've been misled in some ways to believe that it's a significance. We have to balance the mask requirement and the interference with their education versus how much that vaccinated child poses as a risk. From my perspective, with the understanding of the rate of breakthrough infections, I would be opposed to requiring a mask because he's been vaccinated, that's where my cutoff is. Okay? So,
A risk to himself or risk to, let's say, his teachers or other people that they're exposed to?
he's not a risk to himself or a teacher if he doesn't have a breakthrough infection. So the question is, how likely is he to get a breakthrough infection? The answer is, not really. At this point, it's looking like less than 1% chance. And so, as a mask advocate, there comes a cutoff for me between the downside of a child's education when you force them into a mask and how much risk they pose. And if the breakthrough infection rate stays as low as it looks to be, for me, I don't feel like I want to require a mask for that particular child. Remember, and this is my complaint about this, masks do provide some protection from you catching the disease. The primary purpose of the mask is to keep you from spreading the disease. And we start off on our flow charts, sort of implying that the mask, once again, is to protect the kid from infection from someone who was in close contact. Now, I kind of get it if you were exposed and you're not, but really what we really should be asking is, was the child exposed to someone who was positive, who was not masked or was masked? Because really, if someone was positive and they had a mask on, they protected the people around them. This is where the frustration is coming from the public. We are doing insane things that imply that the mask is the protection for their child. As a parent, should they be allowed to make a decision about health care decisions, wearing a mask or the child getting an infection? The problem is, having a child in a mask is not about the child. It's about the people around them. And we keep doing and saying things to imply that the wearing of that mask is protecting ourselves. We should have our own decision about wearing it. And again, I go back to what is our risk of breakthrough infection? And for those like myself who advocate for masks and for vaccines, flip side is we have to acknowledge that those interfere with the education. And at some point, if a vaccinated child's risk of a breakthrough infection falls down to such a low level that they're not really a risk, then I don't want to mandate a mask for that child because we have a trade-off. That is their education and our ability.
And to be clear, I think Dr. Hennigan, I believe that is what this does.
Okay.
As it's approved, if a student or a staff member is vaccinated, unless they become symptomatic, they are
very
not
much
required to wear a mask.
I just have a little semantics trouble with your very
Right.
top left box, because anything that's promoting the idea that the mask is for yourself is shooting us in the foot, and all of the public comments are coming from the misperception that parents are only having kids wear masks to protect themselves. No, it's to protect the people around them.
Which is precisely why option 3 is there for the daily testing. Because there is no issue unless there's an issue for that child to convey the virus.
And I appreciate your comment, and I get where you're coming from.
I just wanted to make that point again, listening to some of the public comments that are based on the idea of masks for the child. In fact, it's great.
We've had 2 positives just recently that come to mind where the person had a mask on that was positive, and there were nobody was deemed a close contact. So they turned the room yellow that yes, there's been a positive in the classroom, but there were no close contacts, so nobody was made to wear a mask. So exactly what you're saying.
I have a couple of things. I want to piggyback off what Dr. Hennigan said just a little bit. I feel like he's made an argument for reasons why we should try to keep children out of masks at the risk of hurting their education, and looking at how low their risk is when it comes to COVID and serious illness of it, and think about that. It's been communicated that less than a 99% chance of death. question about the flow sheet a little bit. Is the health department going into businesses like the YMCA or the rec or even other private businesses and contact tracing as strictly as they are in our schools? And how does that process work? Are they treating it like a home-based contact, or is it like they're doing in our schools, or are they not contact tracing at all in, or say the bowling alleys or places like that? Where I'm just trying to find out the difference and why they're being treated differently. Because even the rec is a government-owned facility.
Yeah, I don't know that. I don't know the answer to that.
And I think they are keeping track if there's, outbreak within a business where there's lots of infections that pass through that business, they're keeping track of that, but not.
Is that something that's accessible to the public? Because our numbers are, so. I think that's something that should be.
Outbreaks are kept track of, but my knowledge is that they are on the KBHG website.
Okay. So not locally, they're not public knowledge?
I'm not aware of that.
Countywide?
I don't know.
And, do parents or persons in the public, maybe not necessarily in the school system, have the opportunity to request a hearing if they feel like, at one time I thought there was the ability to request a hearing if they felt like there wasn't that contact? Whether it would put them in forced quarantine or not, is that something that's?
So there was Senate Bill 40 that gave parents the opportunity to question a mask requirement by a school board. But it's my understanding that the way that law was written when the original emergency disaster declaration expired, that law became null and void. So I believe last year in April or May, the disaster declaration expired and that law went away. It was also, I believe, challenged in court, and correct me if I'm wrong, attorney, but the circuit court, district court ruled that law unconstitutional, but that has now, I think, either been appealed or is in the process of being appealed by the Attorney General. So the way we've been advised is that law no longer applies.
So that has to do with the masking side of it, but not the quarantine side of it.
Correct. Yeah,
So the health department can come in and tell someone they have to quarantine based on hearsay from another person that said they were in close contact.
I believe they have the authority to, that's a public health matter.
And they don't have any right to debate that in court or, I'm just curious.
Yeah, I can't answer that.
I appreciate the things the health department does for us, but I feel at this point they're all powerful and mighty over any other part of government. So I just think that needs to be clarified so people aren't in so much of a panic. And I'm not trying to necessarily bring up the debate, I just want to know where to look for the information when people are asking me.
The public health code, the different set of statutes.
That's what we need to work on, educating people. People are afraid and feel like their rights are being taken away. And I'm not saying necessarily the school district's responsibility, but at least our local governments need to be communicating that better. So, thank you for answering the question.
I realized as an employer, last year, we've had a couple guys, and we had Phoenix County Health Department contact me as the employer of those two guys, that there is close contact just between those two guys, and to let me know, so, as far as them coming into the office when work or out to any job site, that, we take care of that, and at that time, guys were getting paid to stay home.
Right, and I
But
didn't
now
know how much that had changed since.
Well, the only thing that's changed is nobody gets paid anymore. I don't think there's gonna be another PPP coming out or anything like that, or anybody getting paid for what I've seen to date and in the future. I'm part of a couple organizations that keep us up to date on that part, but as an employer, we were able to figure out what we can do with those guys, now to keep them employed. One, keep them in the shop, sorting out material,
right,
stuff like that, but trying to keep that contact down. Okay.
I want to make sure I didn't confuse people. I am still consistently a mask advocate. I simply am speaking against compulsory masks for kids who are vaccinated. is a vaccination. If someone is unvaccinated, they become a potential threat to those around them who are also unvaccinated. And I was only making the point that the breakthrough infection rate looks to be lower than 1%. By not requiring a vaccinated child to wear a mask, we are taking some risk. But that's for me where the benefit of their education without a mask outweighs the risk of those around them. We do, those like myself who advocate for vaccinations and for masks, we do have to search for our cutoff point where we're willing to take the risk in acknowledgement of the fact that masks are disruptive to education. But please don't misunderstand me. My 1% comment was only for those who are vaccinated. The risk of infection for unvaccinated, I don't know what it is, but it's extraordinarily high, higher now with the Delta variant. This virus will only finally go away when we either have a combination of vaccinations and infections, or we finally get down to the lower baseline. Until then, this is going to keep coming around. Each time it comes around, there'll be fewer of us that it'll keep coming around and coming around until we're either vaccinated or infected. That's why I keep advocating for vaccination, which I think is a safer way to gain exposure to the virus.
Janine? Do you have any questions or comments to now?
I don't have any comments or questions right now. It's pretty clear.
Okay.
Just to add on, Jennifer, real quick, Justice Barrett also issued a ruling, or didn't issue a ruling, which spoke volumes too, with regard to some things, I believe with vaccination, and then Justice Roberts also issued a ruling a couple years ago too, on the issue too. So,
Like a while back, is that what you
a
said?
little while back, but it was on public health issues too. So, Justice Barrett's was actually just about a month ago. So, just so you're aware too. Sorry to hijack.
So Glenn shared what numbers and trends that we've been seeing in our community and our school. So I'm going to review a few things in terms of staff, talk a little bit about protocols that we have in place, and then potential impacts for our staff. If you begin and see more of the continuous trend and impacting our staff, what that could look like. So staffing protocols, we currently have a daily screening that we utilize. We have an app for our folks in-house. And they answer questions. We have to update that based on what the KDHE questions are. And so that's live, and we do that twice a day. We get reports in terms of those screenings. That helps with notification to supervisors and also our school nurses. But if an employee's not feeling well, we would handle that. Alex mentioned earlier, no FFCRA leave. That's still not something that's in place. So we utilize accrued leave. We call it emergency leave or sick leave. And I wake up not feeling good, and I call in sick for that day, and then want them to reach out to our school nurse to talk through what those next steps might be. So they could get advice just to stay home. Maybe it's seasonal allergies that I'm struggling with, happens the same week every single year. Not necessarily related to COVID. I know it's coming, so our nurse, those health experts are the ones that give advice. But if they do advise them to get tested, we do some of the testing now in-house, so we can get a rapid test in-house. We also can administer the PCR test, but we do send those off, and we do that on a kind of everyday basis. And we send those off to get read. If it's going to be the latter, so the rapid test usually is a 15-minute turnaround, but if it's going to be the PCR test that gets sent off, then we look at these on a case-by-case basis on how we can help our staff. If the job itself lends to working from home, then we will try to accommodate them, and if not, then we go back and use that accrued leave section as well. So if numbers continue to rise in our community, we saw a little bit of it last year, certainly, when times got really tough in terms of just being able to have what we want in that face-to-face instruction with our kids and the impact that can have. So long-term subs, we currently have 42 long-term subs to fill vacant positions. So those subs, the reason I bring that up is that is our go-to pool as we start dealing with these kinds of things in-house. That's our first level of contact, if you will. So 42 long-term subs covering positions. We currently have 5 of those long-term subs covering international positions. Mr. Gavin talked a little bit about that. We hope that that's short-term and we'll be able to take those 5 subs and circulate them back into what we call our daily call-out list. We have 143 people on that list currently. 42 of those, though, are taken kind of right off the top to help with our pool. Doesn't count, people that are out for activities, maternity leaves, those kinds of things. That all gets thrown out of that remaining 100 sub pool that we have. But you have teachers who calls in sick, so we utilize that daily call out. That's again out of that 100th number, and so we would try to make those requests and fills and get that taken care of. If they can work from home, then obviously we would do that, but there still is a need to cover a classroom. And so you have a teacher that's feeling well, they're going to be quarantined, but they're at home and they're able to carry out their teaching duties. So they can be home to do that, but we still have to have somebody in the room helping monitor if those kids are still live there. So we would utilize our sub pool as part of that coverage. Also, just as a note, as infections began to rise last year, that pool of the remaining 100 people, we had some subs that just refused to work. They were fearful, they didn't want to be adding extra exposure, and so that number dwindled for us as we were moving further along into our COVID issues and impacts, and so that 100 number may get smaller and smaller, and again, they're not under any requirement to sub for us. They're kind of contracted labor, if you will. So they could work different jobs, different schools every single day, and they can also just tell us no, that they don't want to work. And it could be for that reason. It could be they're going to be out of town or available. So those are just on a daily basis.
Steve, I do have a question about these numbers.
Say that again.
I have a question on the numbers.
Yes, ma'am.
So the 42 long-term subs are not part of that 143.
Yeah, so
Or they are
take,
part of it.
yeah, take that 42 off of that. So you got 101.
That's why I just wanted to clarify it. Thank you.
Yes, ma'am, 101 available, and then you start peeling out those other things, maternity leaves and those kinds of things as well. So right now, our fill rate is approximately 60% through the first 9 days of school. But one little note, which isn't a terrible percentage, we had some fill rates much lower than that as we got through the school year last year and as numbers began to get higher and higher. But this is with the first 9 days of school, and the average request is only 20 requests with a fill rate of 12. So that's the 60% fill rate. The 20 requests is not very much. We have close to 600 certified employees in our district. So other impacts could be, again, not something that anybody wants to do again, but remote learning. That may happen as things come along, or it could be a possibility with our impacts because of our ability to staff our buildings. But there's other impacts with that. So parents potentially staying at home with their students depending on the age. Again, there is no FFCRA leave any longer, and so that's going to impact our community as well as pulling our parents out of the workforce essentially because they're going to be home with their kids. Difficult for our teachers too. So we learned a little bit through that process last year, but we're expecting our teachers to teach. But if we're into a remote setting, they're going to have kids at home, and that's certainly not easy either. So there could be some impacts to that instruction model. Community and business, again, workforce availability as numbers start to increase. Connectivity with multiple students in the home. So we had a number of opportunities to get connection last year for kids once we got into that mode. Who knows if those will be there. Some restricts the amount of remote learning that we're able to have. So right now, the restriction is 40 hours, and for USD 457, that's 6 days, based on a 6-hour and 40-minute instructional day. So we can have up to 6 days of remote learning and still receive the funding that is allocated like we do with every one of our students on a per pupil basis. If we get beyond that and require more than those 6 days of remote learning, there's multiple steps that you can take. The state could grant, so the Board of Education would do an application to the state board and request an exemption, and the state could exempt up to 36 total days of remote. So I'm going to come back to that in just a second, but just as a side note, the last bullet, if you think back to where we were a year ago, we were very, very successful in terms of having our in-person learning. One of the few districts to do that, long-term, especially districts that were our size, where we had 18 days of remote, and we had another 2 weeks or 10 days of hybrid. So if you count half of those as remote days, so all total, our impact was 23 days of remote learning last year, which again, nobody liked at all, bottom to top. But 23 days in comparison to some other districts was very good. But now think about that 23 days in terms of the overall restrictions of what HB 2134, that's almost the whole portion that we would be exempted out of. 36 total days is what the state could grant us in terms of that remote learning. So there are individual student exceptions that can happen as well. So it's students that are dealing with an illness, medical conditions, extraordinary events, and so we can exempt individual students from the 6-day requirement. But again, we have to turn those in, identify and turn those in. KSD is working on a form for us to be able to track and do that. But those would be situations where we have a student that's maybe quarantining, and so they want to remote into the classroom while they're home. We can exempt those students out. Anything that's bigger, we're still looking for some direction from the state, but this would be like school-wide initiatives or changing the instruction model to remote learning, or even district-wide is where these powers come into play with what we would have to do to request waiver essentially for that. So the downside is if we get to a point where we have to exceed, so we exceed the 6 days, that's not a big deal. I don't believe the board could do an application for that. We could get a waiver for this 36 hours. But if it went longer and we had to tap in past that 36-hour requirement or 36-day requirement, that could have an impact on our funding on our per pupil basis. They would consider that to be more of like virtual funding, and right now virtual kids are funded at $5,000 per kid, which is more or less half of what we would get per pupil otherwise. So if we get to this level, there could be some other impacts, including our funding in our district. Questions that I can answer?
There's another impact that you didn't list on community and business that I wanted to mention. I spoke with someone who's on the sales tax review committee, and it's my understanding in December, when we were remote, there was an over 2% decrease in sales tax that we saw, which means that people weren't buying things in our local community. So that also has an impact on our community and businesses, because that's putting less money in our community and businesses. So I know when I spoke in December, and I was saying our community's asking us for help, and I believe that those were the words that I used. Our community's also asking us for help here too, because it's going to have an impact on their pocketbooks and their ability to pay property taxes, which is where we get our money. So I think it's really important that we keep our kids in school, because it's going to have an impact there too. So not just workforce availability.
Yeah. Carly, before you ask questions or give your thoughts on this, I want to be really clear. on our website, Friday, late in the afternoon. So that information is out there. Nobody wants to put any requirements or restrictions on our kids or our teachers. But the balance of that is some of what we tried to share with you today, that there could be implications. We also want kids to be in school face-to-face. And just like, we've talked about, last year, we took a number of steps proactively, and even though we used local data, advice from national, state, and local experts, and we balanced that in making decisions, we took a lot of precautions because there weren't vaccinations, there weren't other things to protect us. This year we knowingly went into this without many of those requirements, maybe any of those requirements, but with the idea that we would be monitoring the local data, and there may come a point that a change becomes necessary. Again, at this point, we're not saying one is imminent or recommending something, but I think it is worth reminding people we are trying to let the data drive or inform that decision, and we are presenting that information to you tonight, and we'll continue to do that. 3 weeks from now, when we have our next board meeting, we will do the same thing. If the numbers, the data gets to the point that something needs to happen sooner, we may need to ask the board to come together before that. Hopefully things stay okay or get better, and it doesn't come to that. But I think it's critical people understand we are trying to have school as normally as possible. But as Dr. Hannigan mentioned in his earlier comments, each of us has a tipping point of when do you feel it's appropriate to take more preventative measures to protect from the bad. Obviously, if we had to have more than 36 days of remote learning, that's not good for kids. Having 23 days wasn't good for kids. We would have liked to have had none. But if we don't have the staff to supervise and instruct and cover, we may get to that point. So, again, nothing imminent, nothing recommended here tonight. Data for you, including some of the side effects, that this is bigger than just do we want to put a requirement in place. There are bigger picture issues that may need to be considered at some point.
Appreciate those comments, and of course the obvious game changer now versus then is vaccines. And so I sure hope people avail themselves of vaccines, because it sure seems like that will cut things down as far as rate of infection. With that said, I want to come back to House Bill 2134 and just confirm that with that language in that bill, we created an online learning initiative new this year. And basically, based on that cuts our income from state funds under that law.
That's great. We estimate about $400,000, which we will compensate for that with our ESSER federal funding. We'll evaluate that at the end of this year, and we will have availability of those ESSER funds for 3 years. But yes, it likely will reduce our revenue by about $400,000.
And I haven't read the law, so is that a forever law, or does that sunset?
I don't believe there's a sunset.
I don't think there's a sunset either.
Then there's a need for a fix.
It will need to be revisited, but there's not a sunset clause that I saw in the bill.
And we are anticipating some additional guidance from KSDE in the next few days. But if you remember at the last meeting, we had you approve a list of students who needed to be exempted for medical conditions.
while they're quarantined. But we have examples of some of our teachers right now who are using some of what they did last year to reach out to those kids when they're quarantined and provide daily contact, remote instruction for those kids. Those count as part of the hours. And so, and there's actually districts out there right now telling their teachers, don't do that. Even though that's the best way to reach your kids, don't do it. We're not doing that at this point. We don't believe that that's the right thing to do, but that's the position that law is putting districts in right now. So once we get clarification on exactly what that has to look like from KSDE, we anticipate bringing you a list rather regularly of kids who are quarantined, so that if our teachers, we're not requiring our teachers to do that remote learning in that format, but we do have teachers who are doing it. And we don't want to have to tell them, no, you can't do that. Just send your kids' assignments home in the mail, like we used to do. That is not in kids' best interest.
I'm sorry, I talked to Brad Newswander when he was down here with Dr. Watson for the Kansas Success Tour about that specific issue, because we have a great plan for K-6, except for House Bill 2134. And he's like, there's no way you're going to get it changed. I'm like, well, even if we can present it to KSDE and say, look, this isn't a canned program. This is our teachers teaching our curriculum. This is an awesome program. And he's like, yeah, you're not going to get passed. There's no way the legislature would even listen to you right now. So, I mean, that was his take on it. So I'm like, what can we do to fix this? Because we've got a great program. He's like, no, they're not interested. So, sorry.
My question is with numbers rising, have we done any kind of survey of our teachers to see how they're feeling, like where they're at with this? Have we had a rise in accommodation requests, anything like that?
We haven't sent out any kind of a survey. Yeah, so we've had 7 total accommodation requests, and so first step is to send requests to the HR office, and then we communicate back with the staff member to receive the medical certification, and we had 3 of those 7 follow up with medical certification. Dana, we haven't sent out a survey, but I will tell you from my observations of going through schools, you know, right now as our approved plan says, we recommend people follow the CDC guidelines, and the CDC guidelines right now are vaccinated or not. If you're in a public place, inside, you should wear a mask. And I believe less than 10% of staff and students that I encounter in our schools are making the choice to wear a mask. So, I mean, I think it's pretty clear that people do not want to wear masks. I mean, they want to have things back to normal. And we have talked about some surveys that maybe we could have ready to go for teachers or staff and for parents to help us try to ascertain what is the level that putting some of those restrictions back in place, you know, when would we reach that, but we haven't got anything finalized yet. But right now, the evidence I see is, you know, people want things to be normal.
So you said less than 10% of all staff, so like teachers and building staff.
And Linda, you're out there a bunch, Keith, you're out there a bunch. Yeah, it's just anecdotal, it's just walking through as we're out and about in the buildings. And yeah, I would 100% agree.
Less than 10% district-wide, like not for.
Yeah.
Thank you.
Janine?
Sorry, there's a lag time with my microphone when I click on it. I did have a question about the rapid test, just based on information that I got this week from the health department. I had to make some calls to see about quarantine and testing recommendations on staff. And they told me that if somebody is vaccinated, they really need to have the PCR test and not the rapid test, because it doesn't show up as well as the send-off one does. So that might just be something to check on. That was just as of this last week.
Yeah, Janine, our health professionals are making those recommendations to employees based on their individual circumstances. So we're doing both, whichever way it lends itself at this point.
Okay, thank you.
Yes, ma'am. Thank you.
Thank you. Board open discussion, self-evaluation. Barbara's on the spot.
I think we did some good stuff today. I'm really excited about the unified goaling. I think that's gonna be a great thing for our high school. And then, I'll be attending the, KSB board meeting this weekend, virtually, so, and the first ever, Kansas Sports Commission's board meeting, so I'm really excited about that, so I'll report back when I find out what's going on, from the other districts, next meeting.
Just like to say a huge thank you to the coaches that are out there in the hot sun. A lot of seasons have begun, and started even before that. So obviously that's a positive thing for our kids that have those things, and I just appreciate the extra time.
Things, I just, want to thank everyone who may or may not be watching for coming out and speaking to us, how they feel about the mask situation. Particularly, help dispel the idea that we were considering a change, but nevertheless, there's never a bad time to hear from people about how they feel. I was curious, since we're all here to know the need, that was our retreat. Is there interest in rescheduling a retreat for its original purpose, which was to, is that going to be a work governance part? Follow up that on work governance. Good.
I don't have anything tonight.
I just want to say that presentations about the unified bowling and we haven't approved the new name, so I don't know what to call them. It was just very encouraging because I feel like it's a good positive to the start of school, and as you were attending, I've already been there to visit, so it's a nice chance for me to get into those schools and see what they're doing with the kids, and if any of you ever get an opportunity to go over to that school and visit, it's quite a joy to see what they do and how they take kids from all different backgrounds and needs and find the best way to educate them so they can be successful. So I'm really thankful both of those opportunities given tonight to see that. I guess that's all I have.
Janine?
Yeah, I loved the presentations that we had tonight. I think they were very helpful, and great to see the positivity and the things that are moving along with our schools, unified bowling and everything that's going on with the alternate high school. I agree with Jennifer, they've got some really incredible programs over there to be able to visit, see what's going on. They do an amazing job. I do want to say thank you to all of the people that have reached out and that came to the retreat, our open session the other night. It's nice to hear everybody's different opinions and different viewpoints on masks and how they feel about different issues that are really meaningful to everybody and what we're dealing with right now. So I appreciated everybody taking the time to reach out and contact us about this issue. And that's all I have.
Great. Yeah, I kind of dovetail on everybody's comments. Thursday night I thought was a pretty good success. It's the first one I've been around since I've been to Garden City. great comments by everybody on both sides. It was great to have community input. I think the board needed in my opinion, the board needed to just kind of do a temperature check in our community, in our whole community. I'm not, as far as numbers and all that, as far as nationwide, I'm not a big fan of that, because I can't see nationwide, but I can see everybody in this room, and I know pretty much 3/4 of the people in this room. And I care in one way, shape or another of all the people in this room. I want to be able to see people out in public, at a trap shoot, or at a sporting event, or at a musical. So I care about the local. I care about the local numbers. I care about the local people, the local data. That's me, because local means everything to me and my family. But I appreciate everybody coming out and making those comments Thursday night. And then also the amount of collaboration that this district has between its community stakeholders and the board and everybody involved, the Vacant County Health Department, the admin staff, we appreciate your tireless work. The collaboration of the Unified Bulletin, the collaboration of the Alternative Education Center, and with that, it never ceases to amaze me, and probably us, that we always strive to be better. We always strive to represent what we can be at best at. So I really want to appreciate, and I want to say thank you guys for all coming in and staying this long. Your name should be put up on a plaque that you made it the longest. So we appreciate you being here tonight, and hopefully we get to see you the next time. Dr. Carlin.
Thanks. Just real briefly, thank you all for the positive comments for staff. That is incredibly meaningful in these times, and I think they're genuine, and that kind of leads into, we've had a great start to the school year. It is fun to be out there and see things as we're kind of moving back towards normal, and to see the enthusiasm and see those things that are happening. That's happening as a result of tremendous effort by a lot of staff members, and so really a huge thanks to them. And I think I saw the forecast was like over 100 every day this week, so spot on for all those people that are working after school and with our kids outside and our kids, and we'll be doing all those heat related things. Mr. Tone is on top of that to make sure that we're looking out for our kids. But certainly kudos to the staff, all staff members at all levels, whether it's because of shortages, whether it's because of the circumstances of getting back into things. People are, I think, really going the extra mile, and I want you to be aware of that. The last thing I have is, I think congratulations are probably in order for Laura. It's my understanding that she was selected by the KASB nominating commission to be one of 2 candidates for the KASB president-elect designee. And so congratulations on your selection for that, and the opportunity maybe to represent Garden City at the state level going forward is, that's always something that it's good to have Southwest Kansas represented.
And with that, next Board of Education meeting will take place on Monday, September 13th, 2021 at 6 p.m. here in the board meeting room at the Educational Support Center. I'd like to entertain a motion for adjournment. Motion, seconded, discussion. All in favor, please say aye. Aye. Nay? Meeting adjourned. Thank you, everybody.